Greetings to all of you, my dear sisters and brothers, and my dear friends, and all of you are welcome to a new broadcasting, and we are still in the book of Esther. We're going to talk about from victims to victor. This is your pastor, Yeti, in which the good news of a new law brings hope and joy. Haman was dead, but his murderous edict was still very much alive. Long after wicked people are gone, the consequences of their evil words and deeds live on. Even today, innocent people are suffering because of guilty people who lie in their graves. Unless something intervened within 9 months, the Persian would attack the Jews and wipe them out of the face of the earth. There were about 15 million Jews among the estimate 100 million people in the empire, and therefore the odds were definitely against God's people. Of course, God's people have always been a minority, and one with God is a majority. The Lord had brought Esther and Mordecai to the kingdom for such a time as this, and they were prepared to act. First, the promotion of Mordecai. You can read that in chapter 8, verses 1 to 2 and verse 15. According to the ancient historians, whenever a traitor was executed, that throne appropriated his property. Had Xerxes confiscated Haman's property for himself, he would have acquired a great deal of wealth, but he chose to give Haman's estate to Esther. More than an act of generosity, this gift was probably the king's way of atonishing for his foolish decisions that had brought so much pain to Esther and her people. It's possible that Esther later shared some of this great wealth with the Jews, so they could prepare themselves for the coming crisis. Xerxes knew that both Esther and Mordecai were Jews, but now he was to learn that they were also cousins. Xerxes and Mordecai were relatives by marriage. When Haman was deposed, the king took back his royal ring, the insignia of the authority of the throne, and he gave the ring to Mordecai, making him prime minister. With a Jewish queen and a Jewish prime minister in the palace, the Jews in the empire were in a better political position than ever before. Esther gave the management of Haman's vast estate into the hands of Mordecai, who had first opposed Haman and refused to bow down. Were it not for Mordecai's courage and encouragement of Esther, Haman would still be in control. The king made sure that Mordecai had a uniform worthy to his office, and it's described in Esther 8:15. No longer did Mordecai wear old borrowed robes, but new robes prepared especially for him. The official royal colors were blue and white. The golden crown was probably a large turban that, along with a robe of white and purple, identified Mordecai as an important man of great authority. Everything that Haman had acquired from the king by his scheming, Mordecai received as gifts, because Mordecai was a deserving man. At the beginning of this story, Esther and Mordecai were hardly exemplary in the way they practiced their religious faith, but now we get the impression that things have changed. Both of them have affirmed their Jewish nationality, and both were the means of calling all the Jews in the empire to prayer and fasting. In one sense, they spearheaded the Jewish revival and made being Jewish a more honorable thing in the empire. Second, Esthers Petition. Wealth, prestige, and personal security could never satisfy Esther so long as her people were still in danger. To her, the most important thing in life was not her comfort, but their deliverance, and she couldn't rest until the matter was settled. How unlike some believers today who ignore the needs of the lost world, while they search for new ways to spend money and have fun. They think that attending church and bringing their offerings fulfill their Christian responsibilities and give them the freedom to do whatever they please with the rest of their time and money. We need more people like Esther, whose burden for condemned people was greater than any other thing in her life. Esther couldn't do everything, but she could do something, and what she could do, she did. She approached the throne of the king and asked him to reverse the edict that Haman had devised. It was the interceding of the throne that saved the people of Israel from slaughter. She was asking nothing for herself except that the king save her people and deliver her from the heavy burden on her heart. And as I've studied the scriptures, I've been impressed with the many people who have prayed for the Jews. When Israel sinned, Moses met God on the mountain and interceded for them. He was even willing for God to blot him out of the book of life, if that's what it took to rescue the nation. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul said he was willing to be accursed from Christ if it would help save unbelieving Israel. On Mount Carmel, Elijah prayed for disobedient Israel, and in the palace, Nehemiah prayed for the Jews in Jerusalem. Like Nehemiah, Ezra wept and prayed and asked God to help his sinful people. And Daniel humbled himself as fasted and prayed that he might understand what God's plan was for Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love you. There can be no peace in this world until there is peace in Jerusalem, and there can be no peace in Jerusalem unless God's people obey this command and pray, "Your kingdom come." 3. The King's Proclamation. The problem Esther and Mordecai faced was that the king, simply by executed fiat, couldn't cancel the first edict since the law of the Medes and Persians were unalterable. In modern democratic nations, legislatures can reverse decisions and revoke laws, and the Supreme Court of the land can even declare laws unconstitutional. But not so in the ancient despotic Persian Empire. The voice of the king was the law of the land, and the king could not do wrong. The king couldn't legally revoke his edict, but he could issue a new decree that would favor the Jews. The new decree would be let everybody in the empire know that the king wanted his people to have a different attitude toward the Jews and look favorably upon them. The citizens didn't have to hire a lawyer to explain the new edict to them. You can be sure they got the message. Don't attack the Jews on March 7. Since Mordecai was now prime minister, it was his job to draft the new decree. What he did was give the Jews permission to defend themselves against anybody who would try to kill them and take their property. There were many people in the empire like Haman who hated the Jews, wanted to destroy them, and get their hands on their wealth. The new decree allowed the Jews to assemble and defend themselves, but they were not allowed to be the aggressors. We must pause and consider whether it was really ethical for Mordecai to give the Jews the authority to kill and loot. People who deny the divine inspiration of the Bible like to point to the various massacres in scriptures as evidence that God of the Bible is a bully. Imagine worshipping a God that commanded the slaughter of a whole population. First, Let's consider the edict that Xerxes issued, for that's where all the trouble started. If it was wicked for Mordecai to tell the Jews to defend themselves, then it was even more wicked for Haman and Xerxes to tell the Persians to attack the Jews in the first place. Self-defense isn't a crime, but genocide definitely is. Do these critics approve of the king's edicts? I certainly hope not. Well, if they don't approve of the king's decree, which permitted murder, then how can they disapprove of Mordecai's decree, which allowed the Jews the right to defend themselves? Better than Haman's decree had never been issued, but since it was published, better that Mordecai disarmed it by issue his decree. So if you have your Bible next to you, open it, chapter 9. Now let's look at the record in chapter 9, where you discover 3 important facts. The Jews killed only those who attacked them. They killed only the man. And they didn't lay hands on the loot, although they had the right to do so. The fact that the Jews killed 800 men in the city of Susha alone proved that there were many Persians just waiting for the opportunity to attack God's people. The total number of the slain was 75,000, out of a population of perhaps 100 million people. But the fact that more than 75,000 people were prepared to slaughter the defenseless Jews shows how many of the king's people hated God's people. And the fact that these people were even willing to attack when they knew the Jews would protect themselves is proof that anti-Semitism was very wrong throughout the empire. Mordecai's decree was in complete harmony with God's covenant with Abraham. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. Isaac also would have agreed with Mordecai, for when Isaac blessed Jacob, he said, "Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed to those who bless you." In addition, God promised Moses, "I will be an enemy to your enemies, and an adversary to your adversaries." And don't forget that quotation from Dr. G. Vernon McKee. The Jew had attended the funeral of every one of the nations that tried to exterminate him. It's one thing to write a liberating new edict, and quite another thing to get the message out of the people. Mordecai put the secretaries to work translating and copying the decree, and then he sent the couriers to carry the good news to the people in the various provinces of the empire. Couriers hastened it because they were pressed on by the king's commandment. The things that made the difference was not the writing of the decree or even its distribution in the various provinces. The thing that made the difference was the fact that the Jews believed in the decree. It was their faith in Mordecai's word that changed their lives. They had hope, joy, and peace because they had faith in what the prime minister said. Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. The statement that many people of the land became Jews is variously interpreted. The obvious meaning is that many Gentiles in the empire forsook their pagan religions and became Jewish proselytes. But since the Jews were far from Jerusalem and the ministry of the priest, these converts couldn't be initiated fully into the Jewish faith. They became what were known later as God-fearers or worshippers of God. The book of Esther opens with the Jews keeping a very low profile, so much so that Esther and Mordecai wouldn't even confess their nationality. But now the Jews are proud of their race and so happy with what God had done that they were attracting others to their faith. Even the pagan Gentiles could see that God was caring for his people in a remarkable way. If you have no joy in your religion, there's a leak in your Christianity somewhere. If Christian believers today manifest more of the joy of the Lord, perhaps those outside the faith would be attracted to the church and be willing to consider the message of the gospel. It's worth trying. My dear ones, look what Esther did. In the beginning, she didn't say who she was, a Jewish, like Mordecai. But then they saw the need of the people, and they saw the suffering, and then they came out. Even said Esther, if it becomes my death, I will stand up. May we consider our faith. May we consider our encouragement for others. May we consider what Christ did in our lives. Because He is the one who gave our new opportunities to stand firm in this life. Not only for our own families, not only for our church members, but for those in this falling world. May God bless your heart and soul. Blessings to all of you, my dear ones. This is your Pastor Yadi. Bye.